Today, I'm going to show you how you can connect your Copilot Studio agent to Business Central using MCP. But not just that, I'm going to talk to you about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the public preview of the Business Central MCP server. So let's go. Welcome back to another video from OnlyCopilotFans. I'm your host, AJ Ansari. Now today's video is going to be a little bit longer, and it's because I'm not just going to give you a step-by-step walkthrough of how to connect your Copilot Studio agent to Business Central using the Business Central MCP server that's just come out, but I'm also going to give you some contextually relevant information that's going to be very helpful for you as you attempt to use this functionality for your agents. And that is what I like to call the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, I've been playing with the MCP functionality for Business Central for the last few days, and I've had lots of moments where I cheered, a few tears, maybe not real tears, but certainly some frustration. And I want to save you that frustration of trying to find it all out by yourselves. Now, at this point in time, now I'm making this video on November 16th, 2025. At this point in time, there are a few videos on the Business Central MCP capability on YouTube. One or two of them are specifically related to this new public preview. What I've found is those are either just very high level, showing that it works, or showing just a quick configuration and showing that, how you ask a couple of questions, but they're missing some of the nuance and the details, and I will shoot and aspire to have all of that kind of information available for you so you get a full comprehensive 360-degree view of everything. So where do you need to start? What are the prerequisites? Let's start with that. The prerequisites for this whole setup, if you want to be able to try this, is you are going to have Business Central version 27.1, that is 2025 release wave 2. Release 2025 Wave 2 of Business Central installed on the environment that you're going to use. And you'll need a Copilot Studio environment that already has access to the Business Central MCP preview. So how do you validate that? Let's take a quick look. So if I were to go inside of Business Central Admin Center, I can see that my version of each environment is shown over here. So for instance, a production environment I would not be able to use for any of the MCP functionality right now until it gets its version 27.1 update. However, my sandbox and my sandbox v27.1, they will. I also, by the way, in case somebody's wondering and you've spotted this, have access to a version 28.0. Now, what I want you to know about version 28.0, the only reason I have access to that is because I'm also a Microsoft partner. And as a partner, we have something called the Partner Sandbox user licenses, and that enables us to provision very early access preview environments for future versions. But coming back in here, how do you know if you have, or if you don't have version 27.1, how can you get one right now? So one way is to provision a brand new environment, go to new, provision a sandbox environment, and select version 27.1. Or if you're maxed out on your environments and you just want to upgrade one that's already there, click on the environment and you can then, oops, I don't know what that was about. Click on the environment, and then I really won't be able to see anything over here because 27.2 is not out, but I would choose 27.1 if I'm on 26.5 or older. And then from there, I would be able to select a date. Now, normally you would have picked a date for you at this time, but what you could do is select today's date. And then below, there's going to be another toggle that says allow for that update to happen outside of the standard window that you typically choose. So if you want that update right away, you can do that and schedule the update. And usually it should start updating it right away or within a few minutes or within the hour. And if it doesn't, go back and check if you're actually, if there's an error. So when I was trying to update, you'll notice that I had a couple of extensions from one of my support manager agents. I've built an API library for it. There were some issues within that, and it was failing to upgrade because of it. Ultimately, I was able to successfully upgrade the sandbox environment. So that is important. Now, the other thing is inside of Copilot Studio, you want to verify that you have access to the Business Central MCP preview. And you can do that by going to Tools in your agent. You'll have to have an agent to test this, and then go to Model Context Protocol and see if you see the Business Central MCP preview. If you are not seeing that at this point in the middle of November, you're probably in the minority. So what you could do is provision from the Power Platform Admin Center a new environment that is either production or developer, and you can choose the United States, France, or a handful of other countries. Really, at this point, I think just about any country will do. If you're not seeing it in your country, you might be an exception and not the rule. So provision one in the United States as a country, and you should be able to start seeing it here. Those were the prerequisites. So with that, where do we go? Well, the first thing you'll want to do is to go into Business Central and check to see if you find MCP. Now, if you search for MCP and you don't see it, what you would want to do at that point in time is go to Feature Management. Now, I've found that in brand new created environments, it is enabled already. But if you have an environment that you've upgraded from a previous version, it may not be automatically enabled. So you can come over here and find the feature enable MCP access server access. It would probably be set, if it's not enabled, it would say none. So you would do this toggle, select all users, and that would then make it enabled. So having done that, then you should be able to see MCP. Now you see I've already got it bookmarked here, but I'm just going to search for the word MCP and it's going to show me the configuration list. By default, there's going to be nothing in here. So I'm going to need to create a configuration or more. And so there's a couple of different types of configurations you can make. One configuration could be just for all the base or the standard APIs that Microsoft has created, the library of about 40 that they have, the version 2.0 APIs. And if you wanted to do something like that, I could just call it my standard APIs. From Microsoft. And then you have these options. So if in case you're wondering what the dynamic tool mode and so on are, there's a Microsoft Learn document page on configuring the Business Central MCP server that you can check out. For instance, here it explains each of these things pretty well. So the dynamic tool mode is basically where if you've got this toggled on, the agent can search for tools within the configuration dynamically. You don't have to have the tool explicitly added to the agent configuration. Now, the other thing that I also noticed down here is that there is a limit of about 70 tools that can be exposed at a time in a configuration. So if you have more than 70 tools, one of the things you can do is to enable the discover additional objects. What it does is the 71st and onwards tools that are not covered can be discovered as needed by the agent when you get into those situations. And then you can see that there's also a CRUD toggle here. So we'll talk about that when I go back into my Business Central page. So over here, I'm going to obviously enable my dynamic tool mode. Now, I don't believe I should need the discover additional objects because there's still less than 70 in here. And then to select the standard ones, I could go to add all standard APIs as tools. And here I can see these are the ones that Microsoft has created. If I want to make one of my own, and I have through OnlyCopilotFans, some of you may have downloaded and used this for some of the other things that you do. On my GitHub repository, there is a link to, I have a GitHub repository for a mini library of API pages for Business Central. And you can see the link for that on the bottom of the screen here. And you too can download that. It's free of cost, but I advise you to not use them in a production environment unless you have done some testing. All of the pages, the AL code is available if you want to be able to test and add and build more things around it. You are perfectly okay to do so, but use it at your own risk. So in sandbox environments, it should be perfectly fine. So here is where I'm going to call a new configuration the OnlyCopilotFans. And dynamic tool mode. And I will allow create, update, delete, and then we can select my add tools by API group. And this will show me what I have. And if I had more than one, or my API publisher, and here if I had more than one API group, if I had multiple solutions published, I could see them all here. I've only got one. So I will select that, and now this shows all the pages that I'd created. And I do want to allow creation of new records for customers and also modification of existing records. What's also cool is if you've got code, cloud, cloud scope enabled for the cloud, any code that is a global procedure basically that exists in your API page, you'd also be able to invoke that provided you have enabled it. Otherwise, your agent will not be able to see that. So the preconditions there are it is scope enabled for the cloud, that it is a global procedure, and and then basically it's a bound action, and bound actions are usable by the agent when this box is checked. The most important thing over here is that your configuration has to be marked active. I don't know if I'd done that for the other one, for the default configuration. Let's go ahead and double check up. This was not activated. So if I do need to use that or intend to use it, I would need to activate that as well. So those are the two things. Enable it from feature configuration if it's not enabled, and then from feature management rather, and then create the configuration or configurations that you need. Now, once those are created, you can go into an agent, and I've already got an agent open over here to save us some time. Here are a couple of things that you need to know before you go too far. Number one, per the documentation that I've already read for the Business Central MCP server for Copilot Studio agents, they recommend using GPT-5 or GPT-5. 5.1 was not explicitly mentioned, but said they recommend using GPT-5 for best results. So I'm going to come here and choose GPT-5 Auto. That way you can kind of toggle between my reasoning and chat mode as it needs to. Certainly, I would want my orchestration, my AI orchestration enabled. That is the default. And at the bottom, as always, if you do have web search enabled, occasionally when I create an agent and enabled, I do want to go ahead and make sure that that is disabled, and you can save it. So at this point, I've got the baseline set up. Now, I will tell you right away, one of the bad, ugly type of things is I have seen sometimes just randomly when I first connect to a Business Central MCP server that things either just work right away or sometimes don't work right away, and I might have to delete and recreate that. And I can't quite explain it. I think the best thing I could say over here is that this isn't public preview, folks. So take it with some grace that not everything might be perfectly working. Otherwise, it would be generally available right away, right? So let's go back and take a look at my overview screen. And from here, I can add tools. Now, I don't have any instructions. At this point, instructions are not that important. You should be able to get pretty far because you're talking about a specific tool even without any specific instructions outlined. So we'll go to Business Central MCP Preview. Now, I can't remember if I mentioned at the top of the video, but this feature got released into public preview early November. Now, first time we ever heard about the MCP functionality for Business Central or the Business Central MCP server to be usable by Copilot Studio was around Microsoft Build earlier this year. And at that point, they had a nifty little video, I imagine at that point was clearly a mock-up. And what they highlighted was how easy it would be for you to create an agent that connected to Business Central data without explicit connections to all the different tables or tools that you needed to connect to perform different types of actions. And it was truly marvelous, right? Just remarkable. And in the months that followed, we got a private preview that some of us MVPs had opportunities to play with and access. And then most recently, we got access to the public preview. So having said all of that, just like with any other tool, if you do not see a connection when you're setting it up, make sure that you come down over here and you create a new connection. There is some connector documentation. I can't remember if this opens up on the MCP. No, this is just a standard Business Central connector. So I was hoping that this would maybe take us specifically to this page. For this, just search for Configure Business Central MCP Server Microsoft Learn, and you should be able to do that. Another page that has some relevant information, by the way, is the Create Agents that connect in Copilot Studio that connect to Business Central. Probably would do well to read this as well because this explains a little bit of how the technology works. I'll in fact talk about this a little bit later today when we're going through the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's add and configure. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is, unlike other tools you may be used to, there is no description, right? The AI orchestrator normally requires the description to determine when to call this tool. With MCP, what we're going to experience is that it will just call this tool with a proper mention of Business Central, etc., and the rest, the tool is going to try to find out itself, and you'll see this in action in a little bit. Now, as with other agents, you have the opportunity to choose whether you want to have this work with end user credentials or maker provided credentials. In my videos here, I like to not be bothered by the toggle to log in, so I just select maker provided credentials. In deployed environments, I obviously recommend end user provided credentials so you can have that user security kick in and that user security be considered when they try to access data. So over here, you have a very few fields compared to a standard connection to Business Central that you would do using the Power Platform connectors. There you would have your environment, your company, your API group, your table name, and then based on the type of connector you're using or tool you're using, a myriad of other things that you might have to do. But here, you need to select your environment. So I'm going to select my sandbox. Is that what I was in? Let's just make sure. I was actually in sandbox v27.1. So let's make sure I get back over there. And then for company, I'm going to select my Cronus MCP. And then here, what I've noticed is there is no drop down at this point in time. So I'm actually going to have to type in the name of, or the copy and paste the name of my MCP configuration. So I'm going to select my OnlyCopilotFans, copy and paste this into my agent. If I toggle from here, one thing you're going to notice too that's a little bit different, you may be expecting, if you've seen the Office 365 Outlook MCP, that when you do this, it shows you tools like send email or get emails, etc., etc. So you might experience here, you would see things like find records, get record, find a record, create a record, etc. That's actually not what it's going to show here. Right now, sometimes it doesn't show anything, but don't be worried as long as it's not showing you an error. But what would happen here is this would show you some BC search and a few other types of internal tools that it uses. And then you have a resources area. Also right now, I'm not seeing anything in here, but that should not be anything that's a showstopper either. So we can save this. And once we've got this saved, we should be able to start testing right away. So one of the things that you would expect with most of these connections, I remember almost like a hello world type of knee-jerk reaction. Whenever I first connected to Business Central data using the Power Platform connectors, I used the find records, and the first thing I asked was show me a list of customers. Now, as you've probably seen over here, I have not specifically listed customers here or find records or anything up here, but I should still see show me a list of customers. I might say from Business Central or just show me a list of customers. And you can see the tools, BC Action Search, and so on and so forth that come up. And it's going to now go through, look closely how it's looking at the list OCPF customers, page 90500, and it's used that to show some information. So as I go through, I could show something like, let's actually go back into Business Central and validate that this looks like my 6 customers. Are these indeed what I have? So as we go along, let's just test, make sure. So 6 customers, A Datum, Trey, School of Fine Art, Alpine, Relic Cloud, and Jan's Coffee and Flan. Let's take a look over here. Look about right. Customer numbers also look about right. This is nice. So it's a good place to start. Now, I may also want to maybe see some information like in different columns, maybe filtered by or grouped by. So I know my salesperson code appears on my customer table. So if I just say, show me this as a, maybe first say, show me as a table, grouped by salesperson code. So now salesperson, JO, and then I've got my, all the customers. So let's just check for salesperson, JO, A Datum, Alpine, and Jan's Coffee and Flan. All right, that looks good. And then LT, Tray Research, and Relic Cloud. All right, and then HR for School of Fine Art. This is good, right? So as I want to, I can start adding for more information, have it sort, do all the other things that I'm typically used to being able to do. Now, at the same time, if I wanted more information on something else entirely that I've got in Business Central, so show me a list of items. So as long as I have an API page, as it's pulling that, let's go back into Business Central. Let's take a look. Did we have one for it? Under here, I believe I do. I have an items page, so I should be able to do that. Now, every once in a while, this happens. So notice how even though I have a list over here, it starts to kind of go into a different mode. Instead of looking at the MCP connector, it starts to go look at knowledge sources. And I can't quite figure out why it gets stripped up. And now, if I'm lucky, everything will work fine. But sometimes it goes into this death loop. So show me a list of customers. Let's try this again. Now, how about this? So show that list again. Let's ask that. It's a little snippy telling me I've showed that list already. Okay, yeah, now we're back to a good place. Now, if I wanted to say, show me a list of vendors. All right, I see on the left-hand side, it seems to be doing a pretty good job. This is also good. And now one of the things that I would normally do is say, create a record, right? So let's try to create a record. And if you've seen one of my other videos where I talk about using an adaptive card, that's a more elegant way of doing it. That's true, but in the context of this video, I'm just going to do it without an adaptive card. I'm going to say create a new customer record in Business Central. And we're going to call this Bob's Tea House, located at 2433 East Street, Houston, Texas, 77551, USA. For now, let's just kind of leave that. And salesperson code is JO. Credit limit is $50,000. I'm going to say custom posting group is domestic, and Gen Biz posting group is also domestic. So let's give it this and let's see what it does. It should be able to pull the right tool, kind of figure out what I'm trying to accomplish over here. And it seems like it's created C0020. And if I go back into Business Central and refresh my customers list, I now have Bob's Tea House with all that information. And we see if I were to open this, it should have populated the credit limit correctly. It should have populated my general business and my customer posting group correctly. And so all the pages, all the fields that are available by the API page will get dynamically populated simply by me invoking specifically what I need done there. Now, I've noticed some behavior where I have single quotes. It does try to add a second quote. I haven't quite figured out how to get it to not do that. There may be a specific way, but for now, I'm just going to do it, just manually remove that, and that should take care of that quote issue. I've also got the ability to update a record. So, I assigned this originally to JO. Maybe I want to assign this customer to a different salesperson code, and or let's just go ahead and or lower the credit limit because I can't remember my other salespeople code. So let's say change, Bob's Tea House credit limit to 35,000. Let's see what it's going to do up here. Okay, it's called the modify tool. Because here's an interesting thing. It tried to find a system ID and it wasn't able to locate the system ID. So for those of you who don't know, how some of these things work in business in the context of API pages, you may be used to thinking that every table like a customer has a unique identification by way of its primary key, right? So the vendor number, the customer number, the item number, that defines a primary key. And as long as that number is unique, the record's all good. And if you want to find that record, you can also find that using the customer number or the vendor number, etc. Well, in API pages, there's another field called System ID. And for APIs, even though there is a unique customer or vendor number, that System ID GUID is the most important thing. Without that GUID, most of these tools do not work well. So let's try this again. And let me see if I can find, sometimes I've seen this behavior work better if I mention it by a customer number. And otherwise, when I build my agents using the standard Power Platform connector tools, I have to do a couple of extra steps. I have to do a step that requires me to either use a find records that will first expose for a full list, or find one record where I filter it down by a customer name or the customer number. And then when what I find surfaces the system ID, and then I use the system ID value in the update record tool to be able to do it. So let's see if I'm still stuck with it, or if I can make do just with the customer number. In earlier testing, I was actually successful doing it with just that. So let's go ahead and say update customer credit limit to $35,000. So let's see what it did. Like I said earlier, I found that it was able to surface. So this time, if you see what it's doing is actually did a list first. So if it all passed really quickly, and you may not have seen this, I'll see if I can click on one of these before. Listed. It tried to get a list of pages. So it did a little bit of a plan for itself, where it found from the list of customers, this specific one filtered on customer number equals C00, and there it retrieved the system ID, and then the retrieved system ID GUID that you see down here was used with the modify or the update tool that is typically is used for what we need to do. So now if I were to go back into Business Central, I should be able to go up to this customer, and we now have the updated credit limit. So this is a quick overview of some of the things that it can do. Now, if you wanted to do a mix and match of certain types of things together, this is one of those places where you might say, how well can it work if I wanted to maybe sort something by, show me a list of sales invoices by customer. So here is where I've had some mixed bag reactions, and this is kind of an early introduction to the good, bad, ugly, if you will. So I've now refreshed my test here. I could say, show me a list of sales invoices from Business Central, grouped by customer number, exclude any invoices that are marked paid. All right, so I only want to see open invoices, if you will. So let's see what happens here. So it's going to look at some of the tools. Let's see what it's going to try to do. It is trying to list the invoices. It's doing a little bit of filtering. And so now it showed me the list of invoices that I have. Now, what I have noticed, though, is if I were to not be specific with sales invoices, it might still show me a few of these things that are, or kind of get confused what tool to use. Now, what I want to show too is in this particular one that I have, I only have posted sales invoices. If you are using the Microsoft APIs, you will find that the sales invoices or the invoices API is going to be a mixture of both posted and unposted, which are marked as status draft. They bring them both together in one place. So if you're seeing that, you may have had the need to add one more filter. So some of these things can happen very easily just by way of a prompt. In other cases, you may actually need to create a more detailed prompt. A good example, and I will probably make a video of some of these. I intend to make a whole list of videos around how do I go about creating intelligent or well-working, reliable system instructions. And so one example of that here is if I were to go into my list of agents and let's pick this other one that I was playing with. I made a process because I was trying to get my MCP server to give me a list of customers that were grouped by salesperson name. Now, why that was important for me was that the salesperson code is on the customer table, the salesperson name is on the salespeople table. So it has to do a couple of steps, and it was failing to do that. And so what I was able to do is give it this step by step by basically saying, retrieve a list of salespeople from Business Central. This contains a field called code and a name. Retrieve a list of customers, group this list by the salesperson code, and then replace the code with the salesperson name as found in step 1, and then display the group as listed by the list as requested by the user. So by doing something like this, you'll find that you can get more reliable answers all the time. But let's go back into our agent at this point in time. I think we've seen some good examples. We've seen examples of some, pulling records, modifying records, creating records, seeing things that are grouped. So the things that I would normally have to do. So with that, I want to pivot to the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's start with the good. So the most important thing that I could highlight as a good is I no longer have to use multiple connectors for each. By the way, I've got a little sheet up here. My memory is just not as that good for me to remember all the good, the bads, and the uglies. So I'll kind of look down from time to time at my cheat sheet. So the first one is that there are no more, there's not a need for multiple connectors. So a good example, if I were to go into another agent that I have, let's take a look at, skip out of this into an environment like this and go into one of my agents. And let's look at my Mia assistant, I think, or Prosnet agent. One of these I was playing with one of my workshops. I may have built a lot of things in here. So look at how I've got a find customer, find CLE, so customer ledger entries, and I may have a few more. I just have 2 here. But at least 2 connectors that I had to create, one for finding a list of customers, one for finding a list of customer ledger entries. In the MCP world, I don't need to do all of that, simply by virtue of the fact that I have an MCP configuration that lists both my customers and my customer ledger entries and other things. It will be able to utilize or find records from both of those tables without needing a specific connector. By the same token, if I wanted to be able to create another customer or update a customer record, I would have to come in here and add a create record once for the customers, once for customer ledger entries, which actually you would never create something for, but maybe once for a salesperson and so on. And if there was an update scenario, I would have had to repeat the same step on update records, just like we have over here. So it would have to come like an update record, or maybe it's modify record. I can't remember specifically the name of the connector. It is update record, and I would need one of each. So right away, there is a real savings on the amount of time you spend creating these additional tools one by one by one. So that's good. Now, the other thing that I also find is that in general, the ability to create configurations is going to make your life significantly easier. It's you might use this configuration over and over and over again for multiple projects. And if you do have more than one configuration, you just create 2 different types of Business Central MCP server connections, one for each different configuration that you have. And within here, I love the quick way that you could create and add all standard APIs as tools. Also, I loved the discover additional objects. I thought this was really well planned by Microsoft, understanding that if we have a theoretical capital limit of 70 tools that we cannot exceed, then let's give the ability to discover additional tools dynamically when they're required. So that was pretty cool. I love the permissions aspect. Now I know within your users permission set, there are things they're allowed to create and modify, etc. But above and beyond that, you may want, for the specific use cases where you are exposing these configurations, for users to be able to not create or not modify or not delete. In most cases, I don't think I want users to be able to delete data from an API call, right? There's very seldom that need. I think I would probably want them to be able to go into Business Central and do that thing from there, because if there's anything else, a prompt that they get to confirm deletion, etc. I want them to be able to see that and really understand the seriousness of what they're about to do. So this was really something cool. I also like the allow bound actions, because just because you have that code doesn't mean the maker should be able to invoke that code. Maybe it's for different purposes. So that is those are some of the things that I found to be very good. So let's talk about what I consider to be the bad. Now, the list of what I consider bad is a little bit longer than the good. The good, obviously, I think we've talked about some of the cool things. For me, the most important thing that I would consider bad is the tool discovery time. So if you go back and you actually look back at, let me go back into this environment again, my training, and let's go into agents. Now, if you recall, when I went through the process, I don't know if the activity transcript will show me how long each of these things took, but save view, transcriptless map view. It actually shows, so 350 was a message and 350.34. So it took about 14, 15 seconds for some of this stuff. Let's go look at some of the other actions. In reality, for me, it felt at least, it felt like it took a lot longer when I using these tools at times than it did trying to use my standard tool set. So I would say that is something, but maybe that's going to that'll improve over time. Now, the other thing that I thought was not so good is that the tool here isn't using, or the MCP configuration isn't using the full array of tools that I'm used to. So what do I mean by that? Well, in Power Platform, if you've used the full variety of tools for Business Central, and let's go in here to Add Tool, Business Central. I have find records, run action, get record, delete record, create, update, get adaptive card, list companies. There's some more that are not showing over here, like get URL. There are a variety of things that I can do. Get URL is very helpful when I need to get a deep link to a specific or bookmark to a record. And I was expecting that the MCP configuration or the tools available to it would be all of those same tools just baked inside. But what I've experienced from my testing and trying, and also from reading the documentation, is that that is not the case. Essentially, what's happening over here, let me see if it's in this document or in maybe I think it's in this other document called Create Agents That Connect to Business Central. Here you will see where it explains that BC Business Central MCP Server essentially invoke HTTP operations, the get, post, patch, delete. So it's not the full set of Power Platform connectors. Now, you may be able to make some of those things happen through some intelligent combinations thereof, but things that I've come to rely heavily on, like find records or find one record, or get record where I need to, or the get URL. I love that a lot because sometimes in my agents, I want the user to be able to get a result as an adaptive card, and that adaptive card would have a link, and they could click that link to go straight into that record inside of Business Central, and that is going to be missing. So to me, that was a little bit disappointing. Perhaps in the future we will see that, or what you will find yourself doing is you may have to use a combination of the MCP plus the kind of the Power Platform tools that are available. I also think there's a little bit of a missed opportunity while I'm continuing down my list of kind of things. I feel like there could have been, or maybe there will be in the future. I've actually shared this with some of my friends at the Business Central team. It would be wonderful not just to have the allow, create, modify, delete, etc., but to also set filters right from here. And the reason I say that is in a standard connector. If I were to create a connector to Business Central, let's go in and say, let's find records from Business Central and add and configure. And I can then filter this here by a filter query, a top count, or so on and so forth. And what this basically does is caps our filters at the source. Very different from pulling that full list and then by the user prompt making it rejig that or exclude certain things from the result. By being able to filter right from the source, I can prevent max outs. I can prevent, kind of large data handling errors and so on and so forth. And so we're missing that. If you noticed in the MCP configuration that we were working with, there was no opportunity to do any of that. So we don't have any filters that are available. There's just a session ID, and these are the inputs. So what that means is I've either got to build my filter out inside of my AL code for the API page, or I've got to have the user prompt it. And otherwise, we could run into these situations where the user may be trying to pull way more data than it can handle. So that is something I think where we would do well to add that type of capability. Now, the other thing that I've found is that when I am occasionally working, you may have seen one of those examples, where I was working and suddenly it wasn't able to pull a certain list. I have a lot more examples of that that I ran into, where a perfectly working agent would sometimes just stop giving me responses and start looking into the knowledge source instead of starting to give me answers. And when that happens, at times my only recourse has been to delete that configuration, not the configuration, but to delete this tool and to add that. And that is just something I wasn't very happy with. So let's talk about another thing. I do not have the ability when I'm creating a record to preset a custom value. So what do I mean here? In Business Central's MCP server, if I'm going to use it to create a customer, you remember my example, I highlighted the fields that I wanted dynamically populated. I said the customer name should be, and so on and so on. As I told it, it knew those were the fields that would have to be populated, and it just took those values and set it. But what if I needed something custom populated? And a good example of that is this here, where these values will never be asked of the user. They're just preset. Or let's take the example of what happens when I try to create a record in Business Central using the Power Platform connector. So create record. So let's do this very quickly. We've got our environment, our company, an API category, my API table, basically the page that I want to connect to. And here, then I would add the field. On occasion, I may want a certain value to be hard-coded. And I'm just going to pick some value at this point in time. The value itself is not relevant. I could either have it dynamically filled, or I could say custom value, and I could have that mapped to a variable, or I can have that hard-coded to a certain thing. Or if there was somewhere else where I was setting a filter, like I said before, I'd be able to set a filter. Those types of things are simply not available with the MCP server at this time. So we're missing out. So for those scenarios, if I absolutely need to do that, then I have to also create this type of a connector. And frankly, what I haven't seen, and I haven't had a lot of extensive testing around this at this time, it's the ability to use the two of them in conjunction and see how well it kicks in. I might almost need to have a topic where I would have, if a certain thing is invoked, like if I say do this, then always go into this topic, and that would allow me to force the use of this particular connector. So having talked about the bad, let me talk about some of the things that I just consider are downright ugly. So the first ugly thing for me is this. I like to use the code interpreter in my agents. The code interpreter allows me to generate files. So if I have something that I'm seeing and I say generate this as an Excel file, it would be able to do that, and I can download that, or a Word document, I can do that, and then I can download it, or generate a report, an image, a pie chart, a bar chart, or so on. Those types of things add a lot of value for the user experience. And I've noticed that as soon as I enable this and save it, let's go in and let's delete, don't leave just yet. Let's see, I think I should be able to leave now. Let's also delete the other connectors that we were having. And now I'm going to ask it to show me a list of customers from Business Central. Now it starts, and look at that. Even though it went through the process and it looked like it was about to give me a result, then somehow it then goes into a whole different area at the end. It says no results in keyword or semantic modes. And then it says there's no Business Central actions were found, and just basically renders the model context protocol unusable. That connector, that tool just becomes entirely unusable. So for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why it would stop working or what was going on. And I noticed that this was the types of stuff that this was what was causing it. And now as soon as I turned this off, might need a bit of a refresh. Changes saved. Say, show me a list of customers from Business Central. And there you go. So this started to work reliably. Now, there have been other times where I have found that once something stops working reliably, once or twice, I'll ask it a certain question that it doesn't want to give an answer to. On occasion, it's generated sample data. I've also seen in other cases, once it stops working well, then it just goes off into this la la land. And I have to arrest that trend by starting a new test session, then everything starts working again. In a true user deployment, the user may not understand that, may not always think to start a new test session, or really depending on the type of deployment you're doing. If you're going to be doing a web or an app deployment in channel instead of a kind of a Microsoft 365 Copilot chat channel deployment, they may not have the ability to reset that conversation. So the other part that I really did not like at all is that there is no, that this isn't always the case, but in some cases I've found that if I'm working with an upgraded environment of Business Central, something I've taken from v26.5, I am getting hit or miss results. Sometimes when I try to connect it to an MCP server, as soon as I put in the configuration name, it just does not like it. When I do a tool search, it gives me a little error. So it's hit or miss. It's not working, and then it works. So maybe it takes a little while after the upgrade, or I don't know what's causing it, but that part just doesn't seem very, very reliable. And for a while, I was convinced I just wasn't going to be able to make it work with upgraded environments. The other thing that I think is very ugly, a lot of times you might create a tool, but then you may need to use that tool from inside a topic. A topic allows you to forego or bypass AI orchestration, and for specific scenarios, jump straight into a more deterministic set of steps. You may have a prompt builder in there, you may have an adaptive card for data collection. That's something that I like to use a lot, but I cannot utilize inside of a topic anything that has to do with an MCP server. So over here, when I come up to add a tool, which is where I would expect to find my connectors, my flows, etc., I do not see anything related to MCP. It's not going to be listed over here. It's also not going to be listed any MCP tool. So even though I have a tool, notice my MCP tool doesn't show up over here. So which means that even if I am using an MCP tool for Business Central, but then I want to use adaptive cards or implement that for data collection, I would have to then build another tool, or either here or create another tool and then reference that tool from inside of this topic. And so that is something that I don't really like so much. I think I may have mentioned this in the bad, so if I'm repeating myself, you'll have to forgive me. The get URL thing I use a lot, not being able to use that. So if I were to say, show me a link to view customer a datum corporation in Business Central. And when I've done this before, let's see if it's gonna, this is gonna be interesting. The last few times I was doing this very cute, oh yes, it is doing some very cute filtering. So it's, question mark page equals 21 filter equals. This is not the actual bookmark link that you are able to get with the get URL connector. So while it makes you think it is going to be a link, it is not really the case. So This again, I think, is something that is important, that is simply not there. Was there anything else on my list? A no description in the tool connector. Yep, that is something that I also didn't care very much for. I find that the AI orchestrator works best when my tools have a certain description. I like to define what each tool is for. As I describe it, I notice that the better the description, the more reliable the selection process is for my for that tool to get picked. And simply put, my MCP server does not allow for that. Now, it's not just at the top level of the tool, but what I also have in these traditional Power Platform connectors, let's go ahead and pick another one. I shouldn't have deleted the other ones that I was working at before. Let's do create record. I can do what are basically synonyms or basically another name or display name for certain fields. So if I go down here, and choose and then start to try to add some inputs here. Let's pick city. Even if I have dynamic fill, I can choose the display name to be presented to the user. So sometimes the names of fields may not be may not really make a lot of sense to the user, and I want to be able to put a different name, or I want to be able to provide a little bit of a description. This really helps with dynamic slot filling at times, and both of those options are missing. The final thought is this, and this is really not necessarily anything that the MCP tool promised, but it's an expectation I had. So I wouldn't put this in the ugly category. This is probably outside of the bad and the ugly. This is just one of those places I hope Microsoft will add some capabilities to the future. Today, if I want to find a list of customers grouped by, or if I just say, show me a list of, customer ledger entries that are grouped by something else, and they spawn different table relationships, I will usually need to write process instructions before, or need to explain table relationships in my system instructions before it will reliably create those relationships across tables. Some simple relationships it will normally come up with if I say, show me the customers by salesperson name. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I was really hoping that those things would just naturally improve, that perhaps there would be some schematic connection in the backend with the MCP that the agent would be able to benefit from. And maybe that's going to be part of the roadmap down the road. It's just not available today. So that is one place where I had an expectation that didn't get fulfilled, but I don't know that any promises were made that that was how it was going to work. So all in all, this is a welcome addition. Again, as I told you at the beginning of the video, I always caution when I have these types of discussions that we are at the beginning of the journey. This is a public preview. Clearly, there'll be more improvements as we go along. And even after it becomes generally available, there'll probably be more things that are added. Now, Copilot Studio agents are not the only place where you can use the Business Central MCP server. This just happens to be the place where I use it the most because I'm very much into building agents. I'm not as much into doing development. I know there's a use case for using this with Cloud Anthropic's desktop capabilities. I didn't really spend any time working with that. So there may be other use cases that are valuable for you. But this is a good start. I think this is a tool with a lot of runway. So if you've had a chance to play with it, I would love to hear how it's been for you. If you haven't, hopefully from watching this video, you've picked up some very important steps and some helpful information so that you can go test it today. Like, subscribe, and comment. If you haven't already liked and subscribed, please do that today. And I hope to see you on the next video of Only Copilot Fans. Have a wonderful day, folks.